Welcome to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Miley, an IFS-informed certified trauma recovery coach. This show features interviews from survivors all over the world as they share their impactful story of thriving in their post-traumatic growth. We explore resources, tools, and coping skills to support the trauma survivor community. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Miley. I have with us today Lincoln Stoller, and Lincoln has a PhD in physics, certifications in hypnotherapy, project management, and clinical psychology. He has 50 years of experience with personal development, also a background in brain training, artificial intelligence, spirituality, shamanic healing, and psychedelics. He works with clients who want to reinvent themselves, from therapy to counseling, mentoring, coaching. He accompanies clients through states of mind to explore cultures, lineages, families, and personal achievements. He helps people to integrate the wisdom of the body and the science of the mind. When you can discard what you think and navigate chaos of opportunities, he says, change happens quickly. So, Lincoln, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate you taking this time. Let's just jump right into a little bit of your personal journey. So many different modalities and sciences that you're involved in. How did you land here?
I think it's being curious. I
Mhm.
guess I've never been satisfied with what I've been offered, and even the best teachers, well, the best teachers leave things open,
Yeah.
although we often think the best teachers sew everything up. I've learned that they don't. And yeah, I think early on, by accident, learned about mentoring since I wasn't satisfied with teachers.
Mm.
And there's many kinds of mentoring, but what I looked for was people who shared my enthusiasm or whose enthusiasm I could share and who were doing something. So, there's a kind of, there's a lot of outreach that goes on, and I searched for a lot of people and knocked on a lot of doors, even when I was, young in middle school, and didn't get a lot of reward or encouragement, but I got some. And it is interesting that you don't need a lot of encouragement from the right people to feel very encouraged, and
Mm.
that's sort of what moved me forward. It made me be more independent and more questioning, and I don't know if there's something addictive about it, or you can't say it's very successful, because when you're on your own asking your own questions, you're often not getting answers, but
Right.
somehow the answers you get seem more substantial.
Mhm.
So that took me, once you realize that you can do or try almost anything, uh, the only question is resources and time. You
Mm.
have a lot of time as a young person,
Yeah.
and you can do a lot of things without resources if you're, willing to sort of do it on the sly, on the low end. So, and then you get options to go to school, so graduate school. And the brain training is interesting because it's very slow in coming online. We can talk about it, 50, 60, 70 years, and people still don't understand it.
Right.
And it's not widely practiced, well, it's not taught at all in the standard psychology or coaching context, or any other either, frankly, except its own sort of neurology. So in that regard, I had to meet people and go to conferences and become a client and a practitioner and so forth. But after a while, if you accumulate enough tools, you start to repurpose them, right? You start to
Yeah.
get a shop of tools.
Yeah.
You learn how to write, sort of. That took a long time.
Mm.
Um, and you develop your own style. So I'm comfortable talking mostly because I feel I have something useful to say.
Yeah.
So here
Yeah.
I am.
I love the bit about having a toolbox, and then the toolbox becomes a tool shed, and then you got a whole store of tools. And that's exactly how it works. That's one of the main purposes here on the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. So I can appreciate that. Let's jump into what you were just talking about with brain training, right? So you actually say that practicing mindfulness is a type of brain training. Can you just, what does that actually look like?
I think you have to dig down a little deeper. But if you go back a little further, like a few thousand years, meditation, prayer, seclusion, uh, monastic behavior, or these things were kind of religious and spiritual and not well understood. And they kind of sometimes interacted with politics and culture.
Mm.
And it's kind of considered Eastern, sort of Eastern religious, Buddhists meditation. Although there are, Western traditions of being monastic and focused and stuff. And then recently, over the last, 50 years, mindfulness was really adapted as a meditation technique for healing. The good part is that it has a lot of background and motivation and reward. And
Mm.
the bad part is that it's still considered medically as something you use to heal some dysfunction,
Yeah,
which would be a queer way to look at spirituality.
right. Yeah, agreed.
So, and as it became noticed, there also became a development of the brain and neurology and what's actually happening in your head and states of mind, sort of. And I was involved with that analytic side. So here's what it comes down to. You're, well, of course, these are all stories, but this is my story.
Yeah.
Uh, your brain has certain special functions like language and orientation, balance, um, vigilance or arousal in all kinds of ways, emotional, intellectual. And then it has broad features that sew them all together,
Mm.
like memory and mood and states of energy. And what I've used is brain waves, which are the electrical signals basically from your scalp.
Mm.
So you've got to get through the brain tissue and you've got to get through the bone. And what you get out of it is a kind of muffled signal
Mm.
at your scalp at a location. So you put a sensor there, various ways to put sensors there. And it's becoming more convenient than it used to be that we had to stick a kind of a paste on your scalp.
Yeah.
Then you had to prepare the scalp, clean the scalp, abrade the skin, attach the sensor, keep it attached, um, monitor the connection. And now it's possible just to use headsets that are more sensitive. So this is what I'm telling all my clients, therapy or counseling or coaching, that I'm trying to convince them that there's benefit to it. So
Mhm.
here's the benefit. If you can learn to control some aspect of your brain waves,
Yeah.
they're not entirely voluntary or intentional, but some aspects are, in the sense that mindfulness is something you can control. And you can control your pulse to some degree and your breathing and your temperature and your state of fixation or cogitation or rumination.
Yeah.
And these things can be noticed in your brain waves. And the point of brainwave training is to give you some feedback on things that you otherwise wouldn't notice.
Mm.
So the example would be, if you're driving a car and how we tend to like fall asleep. We don't fall asleep actually. We just zone out and
Right.
we don't remember having driven our car,
Yeah.
although we were there, we were
Yeah.
doing it. But a brainwave training system can alert you when you zone out.
Mm.
So, this is very subtle because mindfulness sort of encourages you to zone out to some degree, but it's specific. You're not really being encouraged to become absent. You're being encouraged to in many cases become relaxed.
Yeah.
And so there's all kinds of relaxation. You can relax your body, you can relax your mind, you can relax your thoughts, you can
Yeah.
relax your spirit. And for people in trauma, there's always something not relaxed somewhere.
Yeah.
You could carry it in your body.
Yeah.
It could be a certain memory. There could be different triggers.
Yeah.
So you want to sense what it's like to become triggered
Mm.
and to be triggered and to control the response when you are triggered.
Yeah.
And all of this stuff we don't tend to really do. We just sort of go with the flow. Something triggers us, we react,
Yeah.
we pursue without complete um, intentionality our day and our schedule.
Yeah.
And the mindfulness meditations or whatever the protocol is for mindfulness
Yeah.
is an attempt to see yourself and control your levels.
Mm.
And the brainwave training takes it a little further.
Mm.
So now you get some feedback. So instead of just sitting quietly and trying to feel relaxed, and after 10 or 15 minutes, getting up and saying, well, that was that.
Check.
Now you've got something that rewards you. And the rewards are typically like auditory. There's a sound level that goes up and down. When you're calmer, the sound gets quieter. And
Mm.
there's all kinds of things that can be added according to which part of your brain and what levels your thresholds are set at.
Yeah.
And what I used to do was put a somewhat complicated system on people's heads that was tuned to their particular issue, whether
Mm.
it was cognitive or spatial or visual or auditory. And then I would try to either tune down or encourage them to be more flexible in some regard. And that was time consuming, and it tended to be expensive because of my time and because of the hardware uses a computer and some amplifier. And so now I'm trying to tell people to get one of these headsets. I tell them to get the Muse,
Mm.
Muse, but it's only because it's cheaper,
Yeah.
not because it's better. I
Mm.
find it sufficient. And I'm always sort of struggling with the people who make the Muse, trying to tell them to do more and do better. And they don't care
Yeah.
because it's in a, they're selling potato chips. They
Yeah.
don't really think of it as a, you know, nutrition, but it is.
Yeah.
So I do, getting to trauma and mental health. People have issues. Uh, if you call your issue a trauma, then it's relatively focused. It's not that focused in the sense that it will bleed into your sleep patterns and your relationship issues
Right.
and your work schedules and the use of substances. I mean, typical substances like caffeine and alcohol, but other substances like marijuana and, um, you know, uh, ADHD kind of drugs,
Mhm.
which are, and depressants. And, you don't even have, so like drug addiction is a totally other thing. So there's just a lot of chemicals,
Yeah.
even eating, right? Eating is an important, uh, call it a pharmaceutical if you want,
Yeah.
and so all this stuff does get back to your brain's state of vigilance and anxiety and reactivity. And if you can learn to control it a step before your coping strategies, it's much easier. You start to pull things together
Mm.
and see how they affect each other.
Mm.
Um, like cogitation is typical, and I'm not sure cogitation is the big problem for a trauma survivor, but it plays its role in being triggered.
Mm.
And if you learn to not cogitate or have some alternative to it, like one good alternative is physical exercise,
Right.
having a routine
Mm.
and staying in shape to some degree, and and knowing how to manage your state of mind.
Mm.
And we notice the big triggers, the things that really set us off, but there are lots of small triggers that
Yeah.
cause us to be more anxious or more nervous. And
Right.
you're trying to get it all down. You're trying to back away from the edge
Mm.
of your whole coping universe to
Yeah.
try to ultimately realize that coping is not a long-term strategy.
Mm,
It's gets you through the day, but it has to be looked at with suspicion. So if
mm,
you've got a way to cope, um, it's not something that you should entrench as a permanent lifestyle.
mm,
It's like a crutch,
mhm. Yeah,
or even worse, a wheelchair,
yeah,
and you want to get out of it.
yeah.
So the brain training, it's hard to explain because it doesn't have a direct effect on your crisis, but it has a pervasive effect on your vulnerability to
Mm,
crisis.
mhm. Yeah,
So this is what I talk to people. Usually they come with some crisis or some issue, and we deal with it. And then I kind of intersperse the discussion with brainwaves and state of mind and control and redirection. And at some point, for I'm not sure I would say the high performance people, but certain people, they'll start to put some energy into that,
mm, yeah,
and then it backs them away from into a different perspective.
mm, yeah,
So that's basically what you want dealing with trauma. It's not that you're trying to solve the trauma, it's
right.
that you're trying to find a different space
Mm,
in which it doesn't um,
yeah,
you know, afflict you.
right. Right. Yeah, having the space between the reaction and the stimuli can expand, right? That can grow so that
Yeah.
if you are triggered, you have more of that space to kind of back. I like the way you say you back up from the edge instead of teetering over and needing a coping skill. You can actually redirect yourself and your brain in that moment and calm those emotions so that then you don't need to kind of just say jump off that edge, right? And kind of move into these coping skills. Tools are great. Your coping skills are your coping skills. They're always really healthy until you don't need them anymore. It's like a child who needs the self-soothing and they might use a pacifier until they don't need it anymore. So coping skills, are great, but the healing part, the actual healing aspects of the brain sounds like it's more your focus of kind of that retraining while people are healing so that they are backed away from that edge. I want to kind of jump backwards to what you were just talking about, losing control and having issues and then possibly even becoming ill. And I know you meant in lots of different
Right.
ways, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
trauma sits in our body. It has a lot of, cognitive illnesses that come with it, physical illnesses. And you actually say that there is purpose in suffering, especially when it comes to like chronic medical conditions. How can a trauma survivor kind of know what their body is trying to tell them, and do things start healing and moving once you can ascertain what the purpose is?
Well, the simple purpose is to be motivated,
Mm,
um, to take action. I mean, this is what pain does. It tells you pain is not there to make you uncomfortable. It's there to make you do something,
yeah, yeah,
you know, fix the problem, stop the bleeding, take your hand off the hot stove.
yeah.
Um, it would be, and often is, a mistake to see it as blame.
Mm,
You know, I've hurt myself, therefore I'm guilty,
right.
or I'm ashamed of what caused this problem. Well, okay, those are real feelings. They came from somewhere. But the
Yeah.
first thing that the pain is trying to tell you is something should change.
Mm, right.
And it's indirect. You would like to get the message more clearly, but your body doesn't talk in intellectualizations
Right.
and and analytical statements.
Right.
It's sensory, it's direct, it has to do with balance.
Mm,
So if you get indigestion, or if you have bowel problems or heart problems or breathing problems or skin problems, skin
skin's
is
a
a
big
big
one.
a
Yeah.
big one. You know, you could look at the problem and say, and this is unfortunately what you'll be told if you go to an allopathic doctor, oh, that's the problem, let's fix it.
Mm,
But my attitude is, it's not the problem, it's the symptom.
Yeah, sure. I
Uh, you,
understand.
you could, take antihistamines or cortisone or anti acids,
Mm,
but you'd like to follow what's being given to you, which may be a pain or maybe a discomfort,
mm,
and see what can you do that makes it feel better.
mm,
So yeah, if your hand is burning, take it off the stove.
right.
Okay. And um, if your relationship is causing you heartbreak, it's that's a good one because a lot of people come with relationship issues.
Yeah.
Relationships are the stage on which we act ourselves out. And it's typical that people say, "Oh, I am me. I'm working on what I've invested in. This person or these people are obstructing me or taking advantage of me. They are the problem."
Yeah.
And it's true in that context, they've become a problem. But you've put yourself in that context.
Hmm.
And, you know, the authoritarian way would be to say, get yourself out of that context,
Yeah.
leave that relationship. But a more understanding approach would be, why did you get in that relationship? What is that relationship giving you? How can you be more uh, open
Mm,
to that relationship and understand it better?
mm, yeah.
So a lot of my clients have problems with their parents, like we all do.
Yeah.
And those problems are hard to fix because parents don't like to change.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I say to them, if you stop feeling aggrieved and needy and instead invite your parents to tell you what their problem is,
Mm,
maybe you'll see why your framework is not moving forward.
mm, yeah.
Um, I have a client who has but fairly abused, physically abused as a child,
Mm,
and now he's an adult, and he's just starting to recognize that his parents never affirm him.
mm,
Well, before they actually tortured him, and now they don't affirm him, and now he's saying, shouldn't they recognize my accomplishments or say something?
yeah.
And, I mean, clearly this is like a little boy talking.
Yeah.
When you're 40, you're not supposed to need your parents' encouragement. I
Yeah.
mean, it's nice and it's collegial and it's friendly,
Right.
but you're not supposed to be like emotionally dysregulated when they don't encourage you. And so here he is at the age of 40, just recognizing
Yeah.
that he's got a relationship that's not fruitful with
Mm,
them.
yeah.
And it doesn't take much. You just have to realize, oh, I've been squeezing, trying to squeeze blood out of a stone.
Yeah.
And I don't need to feel ashamed and guilty because it wasn't my problem to begin with.
Right.
It's
Right.
a subtle change,
Yeah.
but it puts you on a different path to say, oh, maybe I want a different kind of person.
Hmm.
And maybe it's sorrow that I've got here, not guilt.
Right.
Sorrow for who my parents couldn't be
Mm, yeah.
and aren't, and how needy they are.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what was your question here. I got into a
I think that's beautiful. I think
mode.
you're very right. The purpose in suffering is where we were going, but I'm hearing a lot
Right.
of ownership.
Ownership, yes.
And ownership is really the difference between being in victimhood and moving into what
Right.
I call the survivorhood, because now you're taking, well, I didn't do this. This particular thing that happened to me wasn't my fault, but now that I can see it, I can acknowledge it. And now it's my responsibility. Once you
Right.
see it, you have to be able to move forward with some kind of ownership. So I appreciate that languaging.
Hmm.
I think that's really important. I want to be able to honor your time, Lincoln. I want to thank you for being
Okay.
here today.
Thanks. Yeah.
we're so grateful for so many different types of modalities and things that we've talked about. But just in your personal journey, what has been some of the most important and useful resources for you in your healing, in your steps that you've been taking?
I started in mountaineering, which is an odd thing that most people don't do, but it's got a resonance to a lot of our life. You have a challenge, you set yourself in front of it, and it's often unclear what is the best way forward.
Mm,
In mountaineering, you have the idea of getting to the top,
yeah.
but everybody knows that's kind of contrived,
Yeah.
and your life is more important than getting to the top. And that's the sort of model
Yeah.
um, I recognize, and with the clients I work with, I recognize that there is a problem or a goal, but the more important thing is how you get there and how
Right.
you deal with your time and how you conceive of your purpose.
Mm,
Um, so I'm, you know, I tell people you should make the biggest mistakes you can afford to make
yeah.
because they will introduce you to the greatest conflicts and incompatibilities in the world.
Yeah.
So I also say to people, the problems you have are the perfect problems for you to some extent. You want to titrate them and organize them properly so that you're not sinking or drowning in your problems.
Yeah.
But you want them sort of like in a very physical analogy to strengthen you.
Yeah.
So in my case, um, I've come back to interests in science
Mm,
and started rereading articles and textbooks and realize that most of it is wrong.
mm,
And that's true of almost everything. There's some, standard line, and it worked for a while,
yeah.
and then it got into trouble, and then there were people invested in maintaining the status quo. And
Yeah.
so that's, how do you get engaged with things that don't work
Mm,
in a positive way?
right. Yeah.
Those are the things that are very fruitful
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
if you solve a serious problem, you've got a useful solution. Whereas if you just sort of prevail with a reward in a incidental situation, I don't, it never, it just doesn't have a lot of meaning, those small material rewards. So
Mm,
that's what I'm doing for myself. I'm getting more involved with, you know, bigger problems, and I'm sort of dancing around that victim mentality.
mm,
I was the victim of decades of miseducation,
yeah.
and I think we all were.
Yeah.
And it's an empowering state of mind to realize you were victimized by your culture and your education and your family and your job, and now you'd like to create something better.
Yeah.
You'd like to go to Colorado.
Yeah.
I moved to the West Coast.
Yeah.
Our problems are not going to go away when we do that, but we'll now be working on a more meaningful solution than just, how to get to kids to school in the morning and how to relax on the weekends.
Right.
At least we'll be engaging with our higher goals.
Mm,
So that's what I'm doing. I have, various problems in my life, and I say, oh, hell with it. Bring them on.
yeah.
Uh, batten down the hatches and head into the storm.
Let's do it.
Take, the greatest failures you can afford to, because when you win at that, you have something that's really your own.
Mm, yeah.
So that's my personal approach these days.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. I love that. Very, very congruent to a lot of things that we talk about on the show. I love that. Just moving in the direction where you see that there's something that can be changed and then starting
Yeah.
to bring the change to it. So yeah, Lincoln, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where are you on the socials, the website, all that? And I'm going to have all that linked in the show notes below for the listeners and watchers.
Well, three places on my website at mindstrengthbalance.com.
Okay.
And that has mostly the therapy counseling stuff, but I'm a big big involved with education and mentoring.
Mm.
And then, Facebook has a lot of groups, and I don't know, I guess I'm called Lincoln Stoller
Nice.
without a space. And LinkedIn has the professional people, it seems. But
Yeah.
mostly I direct people to my website. And I have a lot of books that I've
Mm.
written.
You
And
do have books. Yeah, those were all on your website. You have a pretty impressive website, honestly.
well, people find it confusing, but that's what can I say? It's a big toolbox,
You have a
you
lot
know.
of information, I guess. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's free hypnosis, self hypnosis audios,
Nice.
which if you go to the products page and look for free or any of the other search terms, you might find something to listen to that
Mhm.
it gives you an audio MP3 file you can download.
Beautiful.
Um, and you can make a free appointment to talk to me with one of the scheduling tools.
Beautiful.
And that's how I work.
Excellent. Lincoln, again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate getting to hear your story and get to know you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to or watching this episode of the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and follow. For any information that was discussed in this podcast episode, check out the show notes below. Until next time, be well.